Hi, everybody. Let me know when you can see and, of course, indeed, hear me. Hello, Tish. Hello, Trist. Hello, Fran. Hello, Judy. I want John to go to York Unleashed at the racecourse. York Unleashed. I don't know what that is. Do let me know when you can see and, of course, indeed, hear me. That would be fantastic. What's York Unleashed? Hello, Trish. Pat. Can see and hear well. Well, that is very encouraging because this is all rather new. Yeah, tell us what York Unleashed is, and I'll tell you what my surprise is. Thank you, Lynn Hall. That's good to know that we're loud and clear. Fran, thank you. All the way from Canada. Me from North Yorkshire. Wishing I hadn't put this coat on now, but there's a method in my madness. I'll tell you what that is in just a moment. So, hello, Leslie. So, basically, if you remember, about, what would have been, 6, 7, maybe, no, 2 months ago, I think, I was in Knaresborough, and everything was planned, got a new route, new tour, the whole thing. I was so excited, and I arrived there, and we had zero internet, do you remember? And I did it from home, which I was really, really fed up about. It's nothing quite so dispiriting. And basically, found out later that there was 2 masts were down, so it was, what can you do? But I kind of thought, I don't want to do this anymore. Don't want to tour anymore, but I don't want to be in such a vulnerable position anymore. That I wondered if there's anything that I could do to kind of mitigate against it. And so I kind of decided to have a punt on something I've been thinking about for a while, which was to buy a satellite. So, they are much smaller than they used to be. And I've spent the last few months last couple of months, sort of trying to put it together. You're in Saltaire, you see, fantastic, Len. Like a rig that would enable me not to need to be plugged into the mains, that could allow me to walk around and do stuff. I've been doing some testing. The testing's gone pretty well. But obviously today is the first time that I'm testing it actually in the flesh. Internet took a break today. Indeed it is, Fran. So, suffice to say, I'm not going to talk about exactly what I'm doing in a minute, because obviously if this goes well, I may well try and develop a commercial arm to supply this to broadcast journalists and so forth. But as far as I'm aware, nobody else is doing this. I am the first. Oh, Comic-Con thing. Okay, yeah. We did that last year, Comic-Con, so I'm sure I can speak to them. If it's the same runners. So basically, I am coming to you. We're not relying on 4G. In fact, the place we have come deliberately here today is there is no 4G. We came down here once before, but I did it as an at-home video because there is no internet. So basically, I'm putting this to the ultimate stress test. I am broadcasting live in a place where there is zero internet. So obviously, everything that is coming to me is coming through the satellite, which is jolly exciting because obviously, in terms of a concept, is if I make this work, and obviously we will know better, by the end of this tour, how well it's worked. Might have to refine some stuff, might have to look at some ways of doing stuff. Is it opens up opportunities for me to go places where there's no internet, obviously Yorkshire Dales, North Yorkshire Moors, and so forth. So in terms of opening up opportunities, it's really kind of exciting. But at this moment in time, it is still a concept, and today is the first live test in front of audience. So do let me know. Do everybody understand what I'm saying? Do you understand quite how kind of different this is? Like the first time I've ever done this. The first time, to my knowledge, anybody has ever anywhere done a virtual tour, walking around with a satellite. I don't think they have. Certainly none of our colleagues have done it. So it is. I'm going to put and say this is a world first, but I could be wrong. Could be proven wrong. Certainly a walking one. People have used these for very static things, but for a walking live stream, to my mind, this is the first time it's ever happened anywhere in the world, and you're witnessing it. How cool is that? So does everybody kind of get what I'm talking about? Does that kind of make sense? You understand how this is kind of different to... hopefully it will be, from your point of view, it will be just the same viewing experience. That I can't promise. I've had to sell my soul a little bit to Elon Musk to enable this to work. But yeah, yes, I'm using his technology, but I've built. So I'm not going to reveal where the satellite is. I'm walking around with the satellite, yes, because I want to, obviously develop this, patent it, and potentially then, look at commercial applications. Because obviously I spent quite a few months developing this kind of mobile rig, but obviously it has to deliver. The first and most important thing is it has to work. And so consequently, walking around with it on is the best way to kind of test that. So as I say, we're doing a live stream today. We're about to start, and we'll head down into Kirkham, beautiful village. But like I say, there's no internet connection here, so the fact that I can do it live off this satellite is just remarkable. So I am thrilled to be able to do this. I'm rather hot. I'm wishing I hadn't put this coat on, but it's too late now. I'm all kind of strapped up, so it'll be manned by aliens, I hope. Yeah. No, I did wonder if I might have a satellite on my head, but no, it doesn't have to be on my head. Takes the moon is well, yeah. Well, I mean, this Julie is the promised world of wireless is almost upon us, isn't it? We don't need to be kind of plugged in. We can have battery power, and we can have wireless power and wireless internet and all these kind of things. So yeah, the opportunity to kind of go other places is endless. Right. Anyway, so let's kind of make a start, and we're going to have a slow wander down. I'm just going to make sure I don't sort of film people, because obviously I'm sat outside. I'm not sat outside. I'm stood outside a pub actually. So I'm just going to spin you around in a minute, and take us. Some of the people that have been in this area you may know of it. We are at the Stone Trough Inn. So this gimbal really needs recalibrating. So it's a lovely pub. Really nice place to be in with, because it kind of sits right on the shoulder of the Derwent Valley, and we're going to walk down towards the Derwent. And from up here, you kind of get those big, wide, open views. The hedges are pretty high, but as we get breaks in the hedges, I'll kind of come over here and give you a kind of perspective. I don't know if I've met. Now you have KCM, have satellite will travel, yeah. And at some point, everyone will have their own satellite. This is going to be the norm. They'll get smaller, I'm sure, but as I say, this is mine. But let me just give you a perspective of this valley that we're about to enter and explore. So I'm trying to watch out for trees, because that is obviously the fallibility. It has to have a good view of the sky. But isn't that lovely? Let us just go over here. So you can just see these rolling hills. As I say, it brings in all sorts of landscapes and areas that you just wouldn't normally expect a place like this to have 4 and 5G, and it doesn't. I mean, that's not to say it's wrong to expect it. I mean, it just simply doesn't. It's not geared up. These areas are not a priority. And, as you can imagine, if you start talking about putting up a 5G mast up here, immediately people start talking about, you're spoiling the countryside and the views and all this kind of thing. So, it's probably a long way off. In fact, satellite technology is almost certainly going to be the way that rural communities are going to get better connectivity to it. But, that's obviously for the future. Searching for the satellite here. Yeah, you're not going to see it. So you get that kind of great wide open view, fields rolling away on both sides, and we'll head down to the river which winds down below. You can see the cows there, and at the inn itself, we'll walk past now, a study for generations, and it's always been a very popular stopping point, a place for travellers, a place for workers, farm workers in particular. And anyone moving between the Wolds and the Howardian Hills. So we're up on the Howardian Hills, so named after Castle Howard, Howardian Hills, right? A place where people paused, looked out over the valley, took a breath before carrying on. We're going to talk a bit about the 1940s, about wartime today on this talk. It's got a particular area. I used to live in Blackheath, Susan. Blackheath is very, very dry, bone dry, I imagine, at the minute. But yeah, just live on Kidbuck Park Road, right off Blackheath. So if you can imagine this in the 1940s, in this agricultural area, it would have been even more of a hub. Farmers coming in for a pint, land girls passing on the bicycles, evacuees from Hull settling into the village, and military vehicles rumbling through the lanes as the country prepared for something enormous. So kind of beginning here feels right. We're standing exactly where thousands of people stood during one of the most intense periods of this valley's history. And as we walk down from the inn, we'll look at these fields on either side of us. And today, as you saw there with recent kind of harvest, you can see these marks of agricultural labour. And it's a lovely pub. A great pub to go and eat is the Stone Trough. So just one last perspective. The Stone Trough Inn, very famous pub up here. And obviously everywhere in the landscape you see the plough lines, the planting rows, the stubble from the recent harvest we just saw there. It's a kind of landscape that's shaped by work, season after season, generation after generation. And obviously, looking at it now, the labour force will be almost entirely male. That's what you kind of get, isn't it, in rural areas. Agricultural labourers tend to be male. But there was a time when this valley was full of young women in overalls and headscarves, cycling down these lanes, milking cows, driving tractors, ploughing these very fields from dawn until dusk. Isn't it lovely? Your trough, I'm guessing the Stone Trough would have been a place for your horses to drink. Was that I genuinely don't know that. That's something I kind of should have had a look at to find out. But does that sound plausible? These people aren't moving. Those people aren't moving. So can I just clarify? Are you talking about something's happening on here? Because obviously I'm trying to monitor this as we're going along. We're not freezing, are we? Can somebody just tell me if obviously I've just come back in on the chat. I'm not quite sure what Leslie was referring to. So obviously if I'm signal dropping, do let me know. I shall walk on. I was thinking, oh, so I'm guessing you heard that too. Maybe, no. Oh, about the fires, yeah, completely. It's awful, isn't it? Oh, there we are. Some lambs over here. So this is how wildlife we are. This is how outdoors we are. Yeah, Susan, that's my gut feeling as well. Stone Trough for the horses. That's what I'm thinking of. Do you know what I mean? That you'd put it obviously on the main street. Do you know what I mean? Or on a main road, as you might say. So the cows, all that grew. People outside the pub, yes, no, it's really rather warm, isn't it, Leslie? You know, they're staying. They're quite happy, and I'm glad about that. I was just sort of suddenly concerned. You thought we're not moving, as in the picture's frozen. So yeah, do we know about the land girls? I bet Leslie knows about this because she's very knowledgeable on these kind of things. But basically, there was a time when this country around Kirkham was held together by the strength and stamina of the women's land army, and there's a big base room around here. So this is where our story begins. So as the storm clouds of war gathered across Europe across the summer of 1939, the women's land army was reconstituted. So not constituted, reconstituted. It had already been a thing in the First World War, where women used to sort of fill the gaps created by men going into active service, because obviously at that time we had far less by way of imported food, and we were much closer to I knew you'd know about land girls. I've just kind of... We've met, Leslie and I, once or twice. Was it once? I can't remember. Anyway, but I just kind of know the sort of stuff that you'd know and be interested in. Very, very smart lady. So, of course, go back to the First War, we're a lot more reliant on our domestic produced food rather than imported food. That's obviously kind of changed, but it meant that huge amounts of people still worked on the land. Obviously, the men went off to war. And so the women kind of had to take over those things to keep the food going. So when they knew that war was coming by the kind of late summer of 1939, they reconstituted the Women's Land Army. And this area around here was almost exclusively farmed by land girls. And as we take another kind of little peeky sneak in a minute over a fence, as soon as we get a place where you can see, with a high hedge, then I'll kind of give you a view. But this area is a big, sort of important industrial agricultural area, rather. So everywhere you look, really, is kind of farmland for miles around. If it's not farmland, it's forestry, as it is over there. But it's not a place of towns and cities. It's a place of. Met someone who worked in munitions. Oh, interesting. So yeah, these are the young women who'd stepped forward when their country needed them, basically. There's a quote at the time by Lady Denman, who was the director of the Women's Land Army, and what she said was, "The land army fights in the fields. It's in the fields of Britain that the most critical battle of the present war may well be fought and won." So it's all part of that idea of the home front, kind of what can we do? And between June 1939 and November 1950, over 200,000 women served in the land army. And we barely talk about them, which is a great pity, I think. They came from every walk of life. Many had never set foot on a farm before, but they ploughed, they grew produce, they milked cows, they caught rats, they drove tractors, and then obviously, as Susan's saying as well, There was then those involved in other areas of the war effort, working in munitions factories, and people involved in textiles, in making of parachutes and so forth, people involved in textiles and making uniforms. So the war effort, you know, was a huge, but in this area, because it was all about kind of farming, it was very much the focus on the land army. So the women enrolled at the local land army headquarters, or simply by putting their name down at the post office. They had to be 17, though some joined a bit younger, some slipped through the net, and the land army looked for kind of physically fit, unmarried women with no dependents, that were ideally enough, kind of mature enough to leave home and to be sent anywhere in the country. Yeah, I think there should be some oral history around this stuff, Polly, and I'm sure there probably is, because, you know, there's very few stories now that aren't covered in some way, kind of shape or form. But it deserves its own story. You know, bit like, you know, we now know an awful lot, don't we, about the, you know, the nurses, both during and after the First World War, you know, and what an education like Agatha Christie went down that route, didn't he? These young girls that, you know, were suddenly exposed to people with limbs blown off and all this, that, and the other, and what a kind of rude awakening it was for these kind of girls that were literally teenage girls. Well, again, this was the same. Becoming in the land army, you know, suddenly meant taking on adult responsibility. Training sort of varied wildly. Some had sort of 4 to 6 weeks agricultural college or a training farm. Some had none at all. Those that did train learned sort of daily routines, how to plant potatoes, milking on rubber udders. So they would create like imitation udders, working with animals, especially horses. The work was exhausting. Many were sick every day at first, but the training kind of broke them into the tough rhythm of land army life. And even then, some girls had to return home because there wasn't enough requests from local farmers, especially in the early war, because many farmers, hard to believe, is it, that men would think this, were reluctant to take on women, and they'd sooner do without, which says an awful lot about them, doesn't it? So the work itself was highly strenuous. Thank you, Leslie. Threshing, you know, threshing is obviously, you know, after the harvest, you know, getting the corn away from the stalks, so it becomes the straw. Milking, mucking out of stables, long days in all weather, hot days like this, kind of nothing like almost any of them had kind of done before, but they kind of threw themselves into it. And accommodation came in kind of 2 forms. There were what they call private billets, farmhouse or farm workers' cottages, often alone or with 1 or 2 other girls, or hostels, big communal houses, or hutments, the ones you tend more often see on kind of films and TV. The girls working here, I was going to do in Westow, but it's about a mile or so's walk, and there's a big wooded cover that I knew that the satellite would break down. So we haven't been to Westow, but nonetheless, it's about a mile that way where they live. So it's much kind of nicer for them. The lovely cottages of Westow. And it must have felt very peaceful, that village, because not only there were land girls living here, but also evacuees from Hull as well. Because Hull had been heavily bombed during the war, so the children were housed in Westow too. And on top of that, there's also getting military personnel building up in this area, just as they were across England in 1943 and 1944. We're going to come back to that towards the second half of the tour. But few of the girls here could have guessed that they were working so close to a top secret project taking shape just down the road from where we are now. And that's obviously where we're kind of heading into next. But what I wanted to take you around and show you is, thank you, I'm glad it's amazing, that's brilliant, is it just so happens we've got a medieval Abbey ruins to show you. So if you weren't enjoying it already, hopefully this will top you. I'm just going to keep giving you periodic little views, and courtesy of my satellite, beaming from space, from down to me, back to you, wherever you are, and isn't that just crazy? So as I say, as far as I'm aware, this is a worldwide first. I've certainly searched for it on YouTube, and I haven't found anybody that's done this. I've found people that have done it on vehicles, I've found people who've done it static, but I've not found anybody that has done it mobile. So you are watching history. I'm using 1080. Yeah, picture basic. Fantastic, Leslie. It should be. I mean, this is the thing, is as long as there's no, as long as you're exposed. So if I went over there, so if you look at, you see up the hillside there, where it's all covered in woodland, it wouldn't work because the satellite wouldn't have a clear view of the sky. I mean, obviously in certain bits where there's clearings it would work, but I couldn't do this kind of constant movement. And I think that's part of it. But that's why I'm thinking things like, you know, walks in the moors, in the dales, in the wolds, coastal paths, something where there's clear, open skies. We should be able to get this result over and over and over again. But obviously where it's smaller, where it's narrower, where there's tree canopies and this, that and the other, there could be issues with that. So everything is contingent on the environment, but over time these will get better anyway. But so I like to think of it as it's the beginning of a new approach that will complement and add to virtual touring and bring in a list of destinations, you know, not just here in Yorkshire, but basically, as far as I'm concerned, anywhere in the world, for people that want to kind of take on board this. And so Julia's been to 2 Films Antiques Roadshow, Next Generation for Kids, and you know, how fantastic. History of the making indeed. No, it's not, it's very, very light, Sandy. Don't worry about that. It is, I've designed a rig that is very, very light for me to be carrying. So that's all right. And obviously that's the thing that I obviously want to try and see if I can interest other parties and demonstrate this works to people like mobile journalists working in the field and so forth, to have a way of having the internet with you wherever you are in the world. As long as you've got Sky, you've got the internet. So no, it's obviously it's an outdoor satellite, Leslie. It's not as powerful. Well, if you think about it, your satellite home, if you've got satellite TV, it's on the roof, isn't it? You don't put it inside, so it's not for indoor live streaming. You still need 4 or 5G for that. So it's a complement rather than a full replacement. But what a complement it is, because as I say, it would seem if I stood here trying to run off 4G, all you'd get is whirring screen. You wouldn't get anything because this is. Even the one there. Well, I'm hoping that it might be start to see a proper financial return for the years that I've put into this craft. I'm not in any way being ungrateful for the tips. That's fantastic. People have always given what they can, and I'm most grateful. But if there was a way to get some more substantial chunks of money by selling this product idea, then that I think would be a fair return on what I've developed. But anyway, so we're in Kirkham Priory, and here we are. So Kirkham Priory, and let me just have a drink, and then we'll go in and have a little look. Look at this gatehouse first. Isn't it wonderful? I know you do love a ruin, so we haven't been to any ruins for quite a while. It's an Augustinian priory. So that means that the monks were followers of St. Augustine. So we'll talk a bit about that. But Augustine of Hippo. Have you heard of St. Augustine of Hippo? He is basically he's one of the first, even monk really, very meaningful is St. Anthony in the desert. And you know, like a lot of monks actually, he just wants to be left alone. But eventually he kind of writes a kind of code. It's a bit like Life of Brian's joke, you know, of they won't leave the hermit alone. You know, is so much of. Apologies if you don't find Life of Brian funny, but whatever you think of Life of Brian, you can't say it's not well observed in the Bible, because it is very much based on religious stories, and one of which is the sheer annoyance of religious hermits who lived a quiet life, but would then get all these followers that would kind of want to be with them to kind of get their spiritual blessing. So consequently, these monastic codes are written by both basically first St. Augustine, but then St. Benedict. So basically, how to behave yourselves. It's like, leave me alone, shut up, be quiet, right? All these kind of things, right? So I can get on with my praying, but okay, you can be over there and you can worship with me in quiet. So much of the monastic codes really is about how not to annoy hermits. There you go. It's the River Derwent. We're going to have a look at the River Derwent in a little bit. The beautiful bridge by John Carr. Everyone loves a ruin, don't they? So, if you want to kind of understand Kirkham Priory, we have to be in long before the canons arrived. I don't mean cannons of guns, I mean obviously canons as in theologians. And the land itself and the people are already kind of living and working here. So when the Domesday book was written in 1086, the bend in the River Swale that we've just seen now wasn't wilderness, it was a small functioning settlement, a kind of handful of farms, a church, meadowland, ploughland and fisheries, all held by Berenger de Tosny, as ever, French name, because almost all the landowners, the powerful people, had come across William the Conqueror and had been rewarded with lands in Yorkshire and across the north as a reward for their service. They had left their homes in what we now call northern France, and of course provided military support, and so consequently they were rewarded. So Beringer de Tosny was one of the Norman lords who came on the conquest and was granted lands in the Sea Valley. So Domesday book gives just a few lines, but they're enough to kind of show that Kirkham was already a place with value, a river that mattered enormously. It provided fish, it shaped the fields, it's what down here, and it offered a natural route through the Howardian hills. So that's a better line, isn't it? That's better. So the Derwent was a working river. Here's the Derwent just over here, by the way. You might be able to hear it actually in the background. You think you're living in a monastery, yeah? Get left alone. So the Derwent is a source of food, of course, a boundary marker. You know, think of it so often when it comes to, you know, how we define land boundaries, or even county boundaries, or even country boundaries. Rivers are really useful, natural boundaries. And a transport corridor, of course, because long before there was roads, the rivers provided the means of moving people, goods, supplies, food, etc. The meadows along its banks were prized for grazing, and the ploughlands above the valley supported mixed farming. So again, as you can see, as we kind of pan out across the hillside here, you know, we've got the sides of a kind of steep valley, kind of ring. So we're at the kind of bottom, we're at the valley bottom down here, and so farming was already kind of well established when the Normans arrived. For the Domesday book, it was a case of counting what was already going on. Nothing was being established here, and the little church mentioned in the Domesday book tells us something important: that people were worshipping on this ground long before the priory was founded. The Normans didn't create Kirkham from scratch. They inherited an Anglo-Saxon estate with its own rhythms and its own history. And the settlement would have been modest but stable. A few kind of timber buildings, small enclosures, livestock pens, and kind of cultivated strips. And the people living here were kind of part of a wider network of rural communities along the Derwent, connected by marriage, by trade, by shared labour. So drink of water. Isn't it glorious? I'm so thrilled to be doing this. Whereas I've had this in the planning now for, without saying anything to anybody, for about 3 months. So it's a culmination, is this. It's jolly exciting. And I actually sent you a sneak preview the other day when I sent you a little Facebook video of me pulling it by Whitby. That I was using it then, but I've been taking it to places where I know there's internet testing. So when later Walter Espec chose this spot for his Augustinian house, he wasn't planting a monastery in an empty countryside. He's building a landscape that was already threaded with human life. That's really important, because wherever the monks settled, they needed a labour force to be able to farm their fields, look after their animals, and provide domestic services, kind of laundry and so forth. Because obviously a monk's task was prayer, spiritual study for the most part. Augustinians were slightly different. We'll come to that in a minute. But for the most part, you know, you've got the monks, people in holy orders, but then you've got people that are working with them, working alongside them, that are doing jobs that are very, very necessary, but aren't necessarily needed to be done by people in holy orders. So basically, when it came to planning where you're going to build your monastery, you're not going to just build it right in the middle of nowhere. You might want it to be in a secluded place, to be away from hustle and bustle, but you would still need these critical things. You'd need access to labour staff, you'd need access to water, okay, and you'd want decent land to be able to grow on. So in actual fact, it was a much more refined process, choosing locations, than just sort of, oh, let's stick one there. A little there for the kids there. Now then, here's a doorway that would get our wonderful friend Ian all weak at the knees. Typical kind of Norman doorway. So they come and base this religious community here in a place where there's already, now do this a crop circle G, I think it's more a kids entertainment thing for the summer holidays, done by English Heritage. Is that lovely? It's called Norman doorway. So the Priory's kind of foundation doesn't erase what comes before it, absorbs it, reorganises it, and kind of gives it a new purpose. And that early settlement is the kind of quiet foundation of everything that follows. Look at that for a view, framing the view through there. So we've got a beautiful Norman doorway. Ian does love Norman doorway, doesn't he? Across the countryside. Isn't it beautiful? So the Priory didn't invent Kirkham, but it transformed it, turning a modest Domesday holding into one of the most significant religious communities in the Derwent Valley. So the story of the Priory begins around 1120 when a chap called Walter Espec, or Espec, I'm not quite sure, E-S-P-E-C, one of the great barons of northern England, decided to found an Augustinian house here. So he was a man of enormous wealth, an estate stretching from Helmsley to Walk, and like many Norman lords of his generation, he used that wealth to establish religious houses. That was kind of the done thing. Don't forget, of course, these were, nominally at least, Christian, and they'd just been involved in lots of battles, lots of killings, and the harrying of the north and all this sort of stuff. So, of course, they were then given penances. And so part of those penances from the church was fund the foundation of an abbey or a priory or a church or a seminary. Okay, so it's no great surprise this stuff happens off the back of the Norman conquest. It's basically them doing their penance for being involved in wars. So founding a kind of priory was a statement of piety, of status, and of kind of political influence. Hello, Linda. I didn't know you were on. Isn't it amazing to be here? And did you join at the beginning, Linda? Do you know that we are live via satellite? I don't see you on before now, so world first. So his charter here gave the new priory land mills and fisheries and the right to several churches. That meant that canons arrived with both spiritual responsibilities and a kind of solid economic base. They generated income, controlled grain production, and tied local tenants to the priory through milling fees. Let's walk down this way. So the Augustinian order was still young in England at this time, and its appeal lay in its flexibility. Augustinian canons were ordained priests who lived a communal life, but served the wider world preaching, hearing confessions, administering sacraments. So they're not enclosed monks. They're not like Cistercians, which becomes the fashion later. They're not even like Benedictines. Where they're most similar is Franciscans, what they call a mendicant order. Franciscans were almost wholly mobile. Augustinians were static insofar as they lived here, but they saw their work was out in the community. So they'd be saying masses in the kind of local churches. So it's not a closed order, it's not a silent order, it's not about withdrawing from the world, it's about at the end of the day coming together with your religious brethren and kind of celebrating and praying, but that you are, your focus is the external world rather than the inner life, because we so often associate, don't we, monkish practices as being about this inner, internal spiritual journey, but the Augustinians weren't like that. So they're hearing confessions, administering sacraments, doing mass and so forth. And the first canons probably came from established houses in Nostell or Bridlington, because obviously what you kind of do is a bit like it's almost like a sourdough, you have to take a bit from something that already exists and lives, then kind of plant it somewhere else, and let that grow, and then that's the sort of self-seed, if that kind of makes sense. It's a really silly comparison, doesn't it? But you didn't just kind of get new people, you usually found a little section of an existing religious house and organised them to be transplanted elsewhere to start again. So they come in and start organising worship, begin shaping the state. They'd have brought books, vestments, and the Augustinian customs that governed daily life. And their arrival kind of marks a shift in the valley's identity. Kirkham becomes a place of prayer, learning, and administration. A Domesday manor became a spiritual centre, drawing tenants, travellers, and patrons into its orbit. And Espec's motives were likely mixed: genuine devotion, a desire to secure prayers for his family, and the political advantage of anchoring his estates with a loyal clerical community. So, what was good for him was also good for the wider world. But, it's kind of mixed. You can be both selfish and benefiting your community at the same time. I think it's a bit of both. So kind of founding a priory also creates a burial place for his lineage and a spiritual safeguard for his lands. So of course, you've then got a place that is kind of sacred to the memory of your family and your descendants kind of going on there. And over the next century, other patrons, especially the Drews family, expanded the priory's holdings with granges at Whitwell, Cram, Bartley Willows and Westow, creating a network of agricultural sites that sustain the canon. So in other words, they would have other farms and other areas that are contributing to the income of this. So we're getting richer and richer and richer by accruing lands and tenants. Obviously, when people die, them leaving money to the church in order to secure their place in heaven. So they're getting richer and richer and richer off the back of these benefices. And obviously tied deeply into the kind of priory life of the life of the Derwent Valley. These, farmers actually producing grain, wool, fish, livestock, and they kind of become the backbone of not only the economy of the priory, but also the economy of the local area. So they become, the monasteries, major employers, but also major drivers of economic activity. By the mid-12th century, Kirkham is no longer a kind of new foundation. It's a thriving Augustinian house with a growing reputation, stable income, and a community of canons who are both priests and land managers. So it's very kind of hands-on. Let's take a drink. And so that they are, if you like, driving economic activity in the area. So we're going to have a little stress test now. So if this doesn't work, it's because the satellite can't see the sky, but there's no point being live and not seeing if we can't do something. So there's a stairway up here, and I'm going to try and go up it. A, because it'll look fantastic to get a visual if we can, but also if the signal drops, it does sort of tell us that I'm kind of reaching the level really of what is possible with this. And I think it may drop, but let's have a little look, and you can then tell me, because I suspect from up here the satellite may not have a fully clear picture. To a better signal now. So when you kind of look at the ruins today, you're seeing only a kind of fraction of what once stood here. Kirkham Priory was a substantial Augustinian complex built in phases from the 12th to the 15th century, and its architecture tells a great deal about the life that was lived within it. Yeah, that's fine. I thought that would happen. I was just kind of testing a theory. That theory kind of paid off. I was just trying to get this. I mean, as it was, there wasn't really any way up there. It was just simply open sky. But if you look at that stairway there, I was seeing if we could get up. But I think then it put us too much into the shadow. But that's fine. That's fine. It's behaving exactly as I kind of thought it was, which is good. So the architecture obviously tells us a lot about people that live within it. The Priory Church, of course, was excuse me, the heart of the site. A long nave used partly for parish worship. A central crossing tower, so we'll pass it towards the church now. And a refined presbytery where the canons sang the daily offices. So for an Augustinian house, it was unusually elaborate, this place. You can kind of see the buildings and quite how much acreage, if that's one a better word, that it occupies. I think this was the kitchen down here. Obviously you can see here from the stonework, the main church element is over here. So it's sounding kind of strong patronage, particularly the Espec and Derwent families. So the church's layout reflected its dual purpose. It was a space for the canon's liturgy and a place where local people could attend mass. So the nave was wide and open, while the presbytery was more ornate, reserved for the canon's choir. So come over here, you'll see a bit of the church. So around the cloister, so the essential monastic buildings, you've got a chapter house where the canons met each morning to read the rules and discuss business. And behind it, next to it, which I guess is over here, this is cloister area. You can see the shape of the cloister. You've got a dormitory, a long communal sleeping hall, with a night stair leading straight to the church for early prayers. So everything that's near to the church is kind of what's needed for prayer. So it's your place of prayer, so you sleep nearby, because obviously at various times of the day and night you're getting up to pray. Whereas at various times of the day and night I get up to go for a wee, but they maybe do that as well. So on the south side there was a dining hall where the community ate their meals, so I'm guessing that must be on this side, I think, could be wrong. Listening to readings, then you've got kitchen, bakehouse, butchery, the kind of logistics of the heart of monastic life. So everything, I should have looked at the map before I came in, shouldn't I? Exactly, but I didn't even know whether we'll get the signal. So there was a guest hall for places, people coming and staying. So they would come and obviously stay with the monks, we would pray with them, people would come on pilgrimages and so forth. A guest hall, and of course those with the resources to do so would be expected to make financial contributions. You got the cloister here, and then beyond the cloister you got the working buildings, the barns, workshops, stables, and the infirmary, which Kirkham had. It was well appointed, had its own chapel, kitchen and garden, so a kind of place to look after the sick, and of course many of the elderly monks that had been here for a long kind of time. The gatehouse that we kind of passed through is kind of the most striking feature, built in the late 13th century with carved shields and English and French royal arms. We'll pass through that, time to get on, isn't it? So in effect it became a sort of self-contained world. Everything that connected the valley to the kind of to the estates, if you like. In other words, the granary is using grain that's been kind of grown on the estates. The sheep are providing wool and clothing and textiles and so forth. So it's the economic engine, if you like. In terms of their kind of daily life then, the canons were ordained priests, they weren't monks, so they spent their days more outward facing than Cistercians or Benedictines, which we've talked about before on other tours. But the rhythm begins before dawn, with matins and lauds in the church, followed by prime. Then the community dispersed, kind of went out into the world. Some say in the cloister to read, study or copy text. And Kirkham would have had a modest library. Theological works, biblical commentaries, that sort of thing, service books, legal documents, stuff relating to the management and ownership of the priory estates. Others would have rode out to serve the parish under Kirkham's control, preaching, hearing confessions, administering sacraments, obviously things like births, marriages and deaths, so funerals, christenings, weddings, all would have come under their purview. Others oversaw the farms, the mills, the fisheries, tenants that formed the economic backbone of the estate. So estate management really was an important part of Augustinian life. Their meals, by the way, were very simple. What they ate, bread, pottage, like sort of oaty stew type stuff, cheese, ale, fish from the Derwent, and eaten in silence while a kind of reader would recite some of the kind of scripture. Meat was allowed, but only for the sick in the infirmary. So it's often said that people would often gather around the infirmary visiting the sick, hoping they could have the leftover meat that was around. The canons obviously slept together in a dormitory, and they returned repeatedly to the church for tertiae, sect, nonnae, vespers and compline. So it was a life that was obviously shaped by religious observance, but it wasn't one that was isolated. They interacted constantly with the local people here, travellers seeking hospitality, tenants paying rent, parishioners asking for help, and pilgrims come to visit their relics. So Augustinian houses were known for their openness, and Kirkham kind of reflects this. A large guest hall, infirmaries were said, the gatehouse chapel, were all being used by the surrounding community. There's a little hook at the bottom, there's a hook. Leave that in. I'm going through. Thanks, yeah. Thank you. So their world was a kind of blend of prayer, service, administration, and human contact. They were spiritual leaders, estate managers, neighbours, woven deeply into the social fabric of the Derwent Valley. And the cloister was more of a home base than a fortress, and their daily life was shaped by as much the needs of the people around them as the rhythm of the liturgy. So I do hope you enjoyed the visit there to the ruins. We're going to kind of walk on. In just terms of how it wrapped up, of course, usual story, Henry VIII, 1539, closed them down, took the money. Henry VIII just basically saw them as cash cows, really, and so basically took over the control of the estates, took the incomes, took the lands. So basically the rhythms of the church and Christianity had kind of governed and created this world. Suddenly it's now the power of the kings. So it was handed over on the 8th of December 1539, by the way. So the report sort of talks about the condition of the buildings, records the priory's goods, assesses its income. So the priory was not wealthy, and it surrendered past without resistance, which is interesting because quite a few places they put up a fight and were supported by the local communities that didn't want to see the monasteries go. The canons received pensions and the valuables were inventoried. The buildings were stripped of lead, timber, furnishings, and of course the stone. You don't have to look very, very far to see buildings that look very, very similar indeed, and actually have bits of church masonry stuck on the wall. If you look at this one over here, you can see it's not hard to guess where the stone embellishments came from. My guess is right over the road. So church roof was removed, bells were taken, cloisters buildings dismantled, like we were talking about in Whitby, with the bells taken. They came and got them too. So over the following decades, the site was quarried for stone, leaving the evocative riverside ruins that we see today. But the dissolution didn't erase the Priory's legacy. The surrounding parishes continued to be shaped by centuries of Augustinian pastoral care. It is a bit naughty, isn't it, really? You know, where would you find a stone sculpture? Let me think. So the estates were then absorbed into secular hands, but the Priory's footprint remained visible in field boundaries, place names, and of course the surviving gatehouse, which is stunning, isn't it? So what ended in 1539 wasn't just a religious institution. It was a way of life, a community of priests who'd served the Derwent Valley for more than 400 years. But their story lingers in the architecture of the records and the quiet sense that this riverside site was once a place of prayer, work, hospitality and human connection. But let's move on. So after the dissolution in 1539, the valley settles back into a quiet, long, quiet rhythm. The Priory buildings were plundered, taken away for building farmhouses, walls and barns and so forth. But the landscape itself changed very little. For centuries, a place of fields, river meadows, small rural communities working on the land as much as they always had. But as we come down to the river, we see a beautiful stone bridge. And it's not just charming, it's historic. So I'll try and get you the best views of the bridge that we can. The bridge that you see today was built, here it is, in 1806, and it was designed by none other than my very favourite architect, John Carr. You know, I'm a bit slightly obsessed with John Carr and his buildings, his bridges. This is another John Carr bridge. Died in 1806, he died in 1807, so he was in his late 80s when he designed this bridge. But his appetite for bridges was in no way diminished. He was, of course, one of the great Georgian architects of Northern England. He built country houses, public buildings, stables, lodges, and here in this quiet valley, he built a bridge that's lasted more than 2 centuries. But of course, as with all bridge, the crossing is much older. The bridge here is first recorded in 1444, and travellers like John Leyland mention it again in the 16th century. Before Carl's stone arches, there would have been a kind of timber bridge repaired again and again. Probably before that, a simple ford. Obviously, we know that the Romans settled on the Derwent. We've talked extensively about the Romans being down here in these valleys. So it could well be that it starts a kind of Roman ford, but isn't it just lovely? So, please don't say no questions. Yeah. So Carr's design kind of replaced all of that with something solid and elegant. You've got one pointed arch, 2 segmented arches, and a kind of gritstone cutwaters rising little refuges where pedestrians could step aside. So I'll show you what they are in a minute. So we go, cut aside. You see these quite a lot in the Dales. We're walking, so we're going to have to do places like Burnsall, really exciting places. Look at this view. This is what this thing is going to give for us. Look at this. This is landscapes we can now explore on a Saturday afternoon. Look at these cottages over here. Tell me this is not worth the price of admission. And I'll tell you what it's worth the price of subscription to Starlink. That's a different question. But isn't it wonderful? So yeah, they cut links, yeah. So imagine you've got vehicles coming across, your pedestrians are crossing too. How do you get safe? Well, you got a little bit here. Isn't that cool? Designed just to keep you. So, yeah, the water, it doesn't really move very fast. It's not a great fast-flowing river, the Derwent. We're in Malton, by the way, a few weeks ago, and that was on the Derwent. And if you watched that Sunday sitting last week, that was on the Derwent as well. So we've got both sides here. Yeah, so Carr, built on a river that already existed, but I mean, I think it's a lovely detail. I'm just trying to get you, and of course, this is beautiful stone. It is so. It is going to be fabulous, Pat, to do this. And it's his style all over this bridge. It's a kind of quiet handshake between the Middle Ages and the Georgian era. He's preserving medieval masonry, and there's a reason for that. He's a Mason. He's a Freemason, and so he's very, very interested in masonry, medieval masonry techniques, and he's evoking an awful lot of his buildings. He's obviously on the one hand, he's a man of the Enlightenment, and he's applying Georgian design principles, but at the same time, he sneaks his little motifs in to to say that there is, if you like, a conversation going on, if that makes sense. If a conversation sounds terribly, pretentious in saying things like that, but there is a link between the styles of the medieval mason stone builders and the 18th century Enlightenment Georgian areas. So look at this view. I mean, look at that view. Is that not just fantastic? So imagine the difference this bridge makes. For centuries, crossing the Derwent would have meant mud, flood water, and a wooden bridge that might or might not survive the winter. Carr's Bridge changes that. It makes the crossing reliable, safe and strong, so you can start to plan. If you think about it, if you're economically invested in farming, or you're thinking about becoming economically invested in this area, the fact there's a stone bridge to get your goods to the market. So, it's really, really easy for us to go, it's a bridge, but it's what do these things represent? And I think that's what I'll always try and invoke on the tools, is thinking about everyday objects or items, but then getting you to think, oh God, of course, yeah, that is such a fundamental part of an infrastructure of a community, that knowing that the bridge is there, that if you grow your crops, you're going to have to get them to market. You're not going to have to walk 20 miles round because the bridge collapsed in a flood, because all these rivers flood, as you'll know. That's a really, really kind of important establishing fact. So it allows you to invest with much more knowledge, invest in your community, and so forth. So they do look lovely, don't they? So grain wagons could run across this, stone carts carrying blocks scavenged from the ruined priory. So unfortunately, what John the Car did, he enabled it, made it much easier to go and nick the stone from there, which is rather shame, but there we go. And then with the arrival of the railway just up the lane here, farm workers and villagers crossed the bridge to reach level crossing and the signal box, watching steam trains thunder through the valley. So this little Georgian bridge, simple as it looks, is one of those enduring pieces of Kirkham's story. It's a John Carr design standing quietly, which had a medieval priory and a Victorian railway. Now, let me just kind of have a look at this for you. Now, again, hopefully we'll be okay. We're not under any trees. I can get you close to this, but it really is about whether a train will come down, because it's a level crossing. Because in the 19th century, everything changed. The railway arrived. Because Kirkham sits on the old York to Scarborough line. I say it's old, but it's still used. Built by the York and North Midland Railways under the direction of none other than George Hudson, of course, the so-called Railway King of York. The line opened in 1845, part of a kind of great Victorian push to connect Yorkshire's market towns, seaside resorts and industrial centres. And right here in this quiet valley beside the ruins, they built a level crossing and a small signal box. Now, why did they build that here? Well, because the railway needed a safe crossing point from where the old road from Malton to Whitwell cut across the tracks. And Victorian railways were meticulous. Every crossing, every junction, every bend of the line had to be controlled. So they placed a signal box at Kirkham, a tiny kind of outpost in the modern world, in the shadow of a medieval priory. So I'm just going to bring you be able to see that in just a moment. It's a beautiful little thing. It's absolutely charming. Here is the Victorian signal box, a level crossing. We may or may not encounter a train. Don't know. So I'm hedging my bets. I'll wander over here so you can get a closer look. But if I dash back, I don't want to get tracked to the wrong side. I have to wait 5 minutes, so because we want to walk down the riverside. So buffering. Oh, we're buffering anyway, a little bit. So the signal would have been responsible for the gates and for the safe passage of trains running between York, Malton and Scarborough. Passenger trains, goods trains, coal trains, livestock, late holidaymakers, heading for the coast. All of them passed through this valley. So imagine the contrast. For hundreds of years, the loudest sounds here were the river, the wind, and the occasional cart on the road. Then suddenly you got steam engines, whistles, carriages rattling through the cutting, smoke drifting across the ruins. The railway changed everything. And it connected the villagers to York in under an hour. It brought goods, news, visitors, and a sense that the world was moving faster. And yet the signal box remained small, almost modest. So there you go, there's the signal box. So hit a buffer there. As I say, you're never quite sure. Could have been the clouds above, who knows. But just move around a little bit and it seems like we're back. So yeah, so I don't know how much, if you're missing any of that, but basically just sort of saying, obviously the arrival of the station, so we get Station House over here, look, next door to it where the station master would have lived. You know, it brings everything. It brings in new forms of connectivity, new forms of connectivity, new forms of people, of trade, of goods, sort of passing through. It makes things sort of possible. And what the railway also brought wasn't just speed for holidaymakers heading for Scarborough or coal wagons rattling through the cutting. It brought something else. Something heavier, something quieter, something that arrived without fanfare and left without trace. Because a railway like this running straight through a secluded valley, hidden from main roads, screened by hills and woodland, was perfect for moving men and equipment without attracting attention. Oh, I'm just looking for the gate. I thought I could get down here. Maybe I have to go down this path over here. And that's exactly what happened here in the months leading up to D-Day. This peaceful valley with its priory ruins, its Georgian bridge, and its little Victorian signal box, was chosen to play a vital role in planning the most important. I'm wondering how people have got down here, because there's a gate down there actually. It was chosen to play a vital role in planning the most important military operation in the Second World War. Now, just to get a bit of a primer, obviously talking about D-Day here, ahead of D-Day, which obviously is after, the German domination of kind of mainland Europe, you're starting from 1943, 1944, a huge build-up of troops and equipment here in England, awaiting the invasion, if you like. But what you had was an enormous logistical challenge, because whichever way you were going to get people to land on the beaches of France, you've got two things. One is, how are you going to get people, and how are you going to get the equipment to onto the beaches? And the secondly is, once you've done that, how do you then subsequently... Sorry, this gate isn't... Is it this way? I'm putting the gate the wrong way. No wonder it didn't work. Once you do that, then how do you then get to deal with the terrain behind in Normandy? Hopefully we're still... So, part of the kind of problem then of planning for D-Day was actually how they're going to do it. So you've got all these soldiers, all these men, you've got all southern England filled with kind of tents, roads jammed with convoys, barns, schools, village halls, private homes, are all kind of taken over by troops in and around the kind of coast. Even up here, there's a lot of service personnel everywhere, because basically they were building up. America obviously has entered the war. We've now got the GI men over here. So we call them the GI men, the American soldiers. General infantrymen, isn't it? Yeah. With their overpaid oversexed over here, with their gum and chocolate and cigarettes and so forth. So everywhere you are, the valleys are never empty, because the scale of this invasion was absolutely enormous. 6 million people are going to be involved in the Allied effort. Large numbers are British and American, but also you've got Canadians, French, Poles, Czechs, Hungarians, and troops from across the empire. And also Jews that had fled Austria and Germany that wanted to kind of do their bit to obviously destroy the Nazis and obviously reclaim their homelands. So before D-Day, you got 39 divisions of soldiers here in England. And the task was to put 156,000 troops ashore in one day, supported by 7,000 vessels and over 11,000 aircraft. So you need detailed, flexible planning and places to train. And also, this thing evolved over years, because once you start doing stuff together, you've got different nations, different services, different institutions. You haven't necessarily got clear lines of authority, who's in charge on this stuff. So consequently, it's messy, it's kind of difficult, and there's a lot of rowing, because there is an awful lot. We talked about amphibious landings. They're difficult to plan, difficult to kind of resource, and if you get it wrong, which they've done in Gallipoli in 1915, and you end up landing, in front of where the guns are, it's going to be a turkey shoot. And obviously, the first sort of 15 minutes famous, isn't it, of Saving Private Ryan, shows what happens when you land on the wrong beach. Is you're incredibly sort of vulnerable. So they're incredibly keen to try and avoid, as far as possible, that kind of situation. But amphibious assaults, are very, very difficult. So they were looking for places where they could kind of drive on. What's the other technology that's going to shape the Normandy kind of landings, involving the army, the navy, air force, engineers, logistics, intelligence. Nobody's really clear on kind of who's in charge. But the Americans are very keen to get on, because they believe the Japanese are going to become a major force in the war, and they want to get the kind of Germans kind of knocked out of the war. So they're very, very keen to have an Allied landing on mainland Europe. And so they're very much pushing to make this happen. So it's about landing people on beaches, but also kind of ship to shore, how to operate in surf zones, tiled, deal with tides, currents and so forth. So you needed people that could handle the vessels, that could control and deal with these kind of landings. Now, obviously you think if you're going to do this, that the place to do this is on a beach. That is the obvious place where you'd go and do it because you can recreate precisely what you're going to encounter. But sadly, it also meant that you would have people could be spied upon, either from the air or fifth columnists, whatever. People could be involved in espionage and so forth. So consequently, all has to be done in secret. And so what better place if you can do this in secret to, isn't it lovely, boat down here, than to have a valley where you can seal off both sides, where nobody is looking over you, and you've got a railway station that can drop off people and goods. And so what we called large, slow targets, about 300 feet long. These landing ones, so that the vessels that you're looking at in Saving Private Ryan that could pull troops right onto the beach, they brought them up here. They're awful things. They induced near universal seasickness, stank of diesel, oil, backed up toilets and vomit apparently, but indispensable. So this is where they started the training, in this valley, in this water, going up and down, in and out of the water. But of course, it's not just a case of saying, okay, how do I put people on a beach? It's what happens afterwards. Well, if you look at Normandy, which is where they planned, I mean, obviously they wanted the Germans to believe that they were going to be attacking Nord-Pas-de-Calais. But of course, the plan was always to go to Normandy, which meant, of course, once you get off the beaches, you've got dense woodland, right? You've got forestry, you've got the bocage, which is a very, very thick fences and so, hedges and so forth. So this environment was mocked up and created as an artificial version of Normandy. And you had thousands of troops here in the run-up to D-Day, basically doing dry run of the 6th of June invasion. Unbelievable, and all in top secret. King George VI came down here. Princess Elizabeth, who was then his daughter, obviously she came before she was queen, obviously. Winston Churchill visited on many occasions because they had the cover of this station up here and everything was under complete military control. There was points at, there's only one road in and one road out, so it's very, very easy under military control to sort of seal this stuff off. And so what you're looking at here is where they did the blueprint for the rehearsals for the D-Day landings. If you look at the where we just were in the ruins there, you've got straight lines. Well, they use this for scaling rocks, so climbing cliff faces, you know, using kind of ropes and netting and cargo nets and all this sort of stuff. So how to deal with the landscape that they were going to be facing when they got to France. Dry run rehearsed here. Isn't that incredible? In the midst of this quiet little valley in North Yorkshire, this beautiful village, this setting for a medieval priory, that this should have been a key role in what's to become the most important military operation of the 20th century. So there we go. That is Kirkham. I do hope that you've enjoyed that. I've certainly enjoyed bringing it here. We've had a couple of bits of buffering, but other than that, I would say it is a proof of concept. It's worked very, very well. My first ever satellite mobile link. Hello, fellas.
Hello.
Not meaning to film you, but...
no, you're all good, mate.
You good?
It's very interesting.
Did you not know that about this?
I never knew that.
No, yeah. It's all the landing craft. You like Saving Private Ryan? It's all tested down here. In secret, top secret, they close everything off, you know. But in those days, there's no internet, there's no films, so you can do all that sort of stuff, you know. Government just like, you say nothing, so all the farmers, but yeah, down here.
Wow.
Amazing, huh? Just goes to show, lots of people we don't even know our own history, lots of us, so isn't that beautiful? Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? There's John Carr's Bridge there. So I do hope you've enjoyed that. I've certainly enjoyed bringing you here. And it's been very different, as I say, very, very liberating, because whilst I've been thinking about, obviously, all the time, making sure that, you know, I'm trying to stay within range, not getting covered over in this, that and the other. But spoilers for the other guys. Yes, well, you know, this rig can work anywhere, basically. It's been designed. So this is proof of concept. So as I say, I'm not going to lie, I have now got another monthly subscription to pay for the satellites. If you're able to help with the cost of that, that's fantastic. But obviously, I'll be able to repay you directly by taking you to places that you haven't been before. So start looking forward. Well, I'll go back, watch the video, but from what you're telling me, it's kind of worked well. And we'll get ourselves across the Yorkshire moors. We'll go and see some lovely villages, places that, you know, that I would love to have taken you by Huntley Hole, Julian know about it. Stunning village in Rydale, maybe 45 minutes drive from York or something, up past Helmsley Way, you know, but no internet whatsoever. Now we can go. Hovingham, stunning village. Castle Howard Estate, we can go. Okay, Yorkshire Dales, we can go. Yorkshire Moors, we can go. The Wolds, we can go. Right? So it opens up a complete new range of destinations that as long as, you know, we're able to make it work with petrol money and so forth, then that will be fantastic. But there we go. Isn't that? Thank you, whoever did that. That's 5 there. That's most appreciated. It worked very well. Fantastic. Brilliant. Well, there you go. Farndale. So much to look forward to in Deeper. And so much to inspire me as well to think, oh, great. Because obviously you do think, oh gosh, I'm running out of places. I don't want to just take you to York every week because, you know, it's not like Paris or London where it's so big that you can endlessly find new places, new things to talk about. So, you know, Yorkshire is my playground rather than just York. And this will enable us to go some more places. So anybody's contributed, I do thank you. Thank you, Fran, for sending that through. That is most appreciated. And I look forward to seeing you. I'm not sure yet about... what do you call it? Second sitting. It is as fun as it is. It's starting to get very, very small audiences indeed. So it's getting very much like me sitting and chatting to 2 or 3 people. You know, if it's not what's needed, or at least not this time of year, then obviously we can say I tried and it didn't necessarily get the traction that I might have hoped. But I'll maybe just do a survey out there and ask you kind of what you think. But as I say, I've never asked for tips for that. I don't expect them. It's a repeat. It's more of a kind of communal kind of coming together. But obviously what I am trying to do is push up the numbers of watching the videos because, Natalie's talked about and so forth, it's very, very hard to get discoverability, you know, unless you're getting traction on numbers. So consequently, you know, getting people through and watching stuff is the kind of the best way, or is a very important way to support the channel. But anyway, that's another conversation for another day. I'm going to give you a final view as I walk back towards the car across this delightful spot. Marianne, have you found a property you're going to choose to add to your burgeoning portfolio? And look how dry, of course, it all is as well. And what should be lush greenery is anything but at least there's water here. So it's good to know that the birds can come in and get a bath, get a wash. The animals, you see sheep around here, that there is access to water. It is a lovely picture, isn't it, Casey? Mate? Absolutely delightful. Standing on John Carr's Bridge, giving you a view. I think that's pretty much the photograph that I put on the YouTube tour, didn't I? Thank you, Nathan. So yeah, as I say, I'm not going to sort of say at this point exactly how I'm doing this, simply because I want to keep it. To me, obviously, I've had to do quite a lot of research and had to buy various things and develop it and make some things and just try and work it out for myself. So I've now got something that nobody else in the world has got, as far as I'm aware. So consequently, I'm not going to say, here's how I did it just yet. I'm going to see if I can't maybe get some sponsorship. You know, I think if I'm doing this, it would be nice to approach Starlink and say, look at all the places we could take you to with your kit. So maybe they will look on me kindly and give me a free subscription. You never know. It's worth asking, isn't it? They can only say no. And I think Elon Musk could afford that, couldn't he? I think he could afford to let me off my monthly subscription if I was out here showing how his product can be used to make the world a closer and a nicer place. So there we go. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. I look forward to seeing you all very, very soon. And yeah, tell everybody you've seen witchcraft, you've seen a world first, and we will see. I'll go back home now and watch the video, but hopefully from what you've said, it was all good in 1080 HD, and look forward to it again. But test number 1 appears to have been a success, so I shall spin myself around, give you a wave, say thank you. Thank everybody who came to Whitby as well. Whitby was such fun. I love that, and thank you for the feedback. You know, I'm not doing the continuous stories all the time because, you know, I don't want it to become a one-trick pony, and also it's a lot of work. But it's also deeply satisfying when you feel like you could have got it right. And the feedback I got, I think, from people was that it worked with that particular location. A kind of single story had worked nicely. So it worked for there, but perhaps not for here. So today, slightly different, obviously different things: land girls, the Priory, the bridge, the railway, and then the D-Day landings, preparations. So I haven't sort of fundamentally changed just being a single narrative, but I think it's another tool in the armoury. So there we go. Thank you everybody who's joined me, and I look forward to seeing you very, very soon. Thank you from Kirkham Grange in North Yorkshire. Thank you, Tish. I will say goodbye.